Call the regular meeting of the East Bay Township Board to order for December 12th, 2022. If you'll join me with beginning with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Ann, would you do a roll call attendance, please?
Sure. Walters.
Present.
Bartlett.
Yes.
Lyle.
Yes.
Cook.
Here.
Cortade. M. Cortade.
Here.
S. Cortade.
Here.
Friend.
Here. Okay, with that, we'll review for conflict of interest, the agenda. You have the agenda in front of you, which is pretty standard and typical. Correspondence and reports, consent agenda, which includes Board of Review appointments, the Flex Plan Supplemental Funding Grant Award for East Bay Ambulance, resolution for the 2023 Township Board meeting dates, the summer tax agreement with Northwest Education Services, the TTCI board representation, a liquor license modification, the DNR Spark grant application resolution, and then business before the board. We have a Traverse Connect. Warren Call is here to talk about the proposed agreement in our packet. Also, a grant application through Eagle for US 31, and the zoning administration classification. With that, I would like to add on just a brief discussion at the end on the CIP plan. Just a brief discussion, wanted to get your input on something with that. But with that, does anybody have a conflict of interest with any of the agenda items? Okay, seeing none, is there approval of the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented
Okay, and amended, right?
and amended.
Awesome, thank you. Support. Motion by Cook, support by Lyle. Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we have an agenda. And with that, we'll move forward to public comment. Ann, do you want to read the rules?
Sure. The purpose of the public comment is to give members of the public an opportunity to express their views and opinions to the members of this board. To maintain order and ensure fairness to every speaker, the following rules must be followed during public comment. Speakers will approach the podium and introduce themselves by stating their name and address, and then proceed to make their comment. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes and is only allowed to speak once on the same matter. Communication previously emailed to the commission is not necessary to read aloud. Public comment time may not be given to another member of the public. Any arrangement for speaking on behalf of others must be arranged prior to the meeting. When your time is at 2 minutes 30 seconds, you'll be alerted with a yellow signal. And when it is at 3 minutes, you'll be alerted with a red signal, and the chair will ask you to conclude your comments. That is a synopsis.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any public comment? Just make your way up to the podium and introduce yourself. Hello.
Hello, hi everyone. My name is Mary Thompson. I live at 5551 Scout Camp Road. I'm a grateful resident of East Bay Township, and sure thank you for all the things that you do as our elected officials. I do have a couple of handouts. I promise it's not homework. It's just some information that I'd like you to have. If you want to just take one and pass it down.
We'll just hand them to Ann. Okay.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's 7. The first packet is proposed ordinances that I drafted that I thought would be great to have in our community. I've given them already to the subcommittee that a couple of you guys are on, and then I went to the Planning Commission and passed them out there as well. I just kind of want to have everybody to have them. I think they would really help our community. There's 2 that I'd like to point out, and one is an anti-funneling ordinance. And that goes beyond our key holding ordinance that we have right now, and it can be applied to like condos, campgrounds, anything with large property and a relatively narrow inlet that would overburden the lakes. This is what that ordinance would speak to, and it's already in other communities. I believe I even quoted one from Hayes Township on there, excuse me. The other one I would really like to see, and to make it nice and clear and easy, no event centers in the Lakes Area District. Let's just keep them in the business district or perhaps the industrial district. They're more appropriate there. Nobody has to figure out any gray areas. Just keep them there where the neighborhoods can handle that noise and extra activity. So then the other thing I passed out is an article from Cliff Bloom, who's an attorney in the state, and he is an expert on water law. And it's about saying that the townships do have the authority to regulate boat launches into bodies of water. So you can do that through a variety of means, and he explains that in that article. I just thought you might want to see that. The only other thing I wanted to discuss was, I wasn't there at the last subcommittee meeting, and there's no minutes or video yet that I've seen, but I did hear that one of the proposals was to take away PUD review from the Board of Trustees and just give it to the planning commissioners. I know that is allowed under the law, but we need our ability, a place to have our voices heard and political, because, these PUDs can be very politically charged. And to take our voices away is not a good idea. We don't want to be disenfranchised. So keep it with you guys. It's a good procedure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Good evening and happy holidays to you all. Judy Nemitz, East Bay Township resident. I'd like to segue on what Ms. Thompson said regarding the subcommittee and the possible zoning enabling act with the PUD and that type of thing. We are a township that's pretty it's residential and rural. There are townships that do different procedures regarding PUDs throughout the state, and they differ. And under the Zoning Enabling Act, that is permitted. But for the years that many of you have served, and I have served, 99% of the time, the system that's in place has been very effective and has worked. It's also a system of checks and balances where we have appointed officials that are reviewing, and then we have elected officials. So we have an executive branch, and we kind of have a legislative branch. And that is the foundation of our basic constitution. The Federalist Papers, Article 51, talks a great deal about checks and balances. And I want you to think about that should something like that come about. It is in the Zoning Enabling Act, but I think checks and balances is a foundation of our democracy. And I think we really need to keep that in place for that reason. And because of the complex nature of our township and how large it is as well. I think the other thing that we need to understand is that it has worked, like I said, 99% of the time. And I think that's pretty good. In government, that's very good. And you're all have served on planning commissions or in other aspects of government. We have two wonderful people that have, Beth is our current supervisor, Glenn was a supervisor. I've worked with many of you on planning. You're very knowledgeable, and I don't want to take you out of the process in any way. So I think we really need to look at that if that is a direction we want to move in. And I'll leave us with something that I think is first and foremost kind of said by our 16th president, Lincoln, that we are a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to correspondence and reports. You have the correspondence in your packet to review. And with that, we'll move on to consent agenda.
The purpose of the consent agenda is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one board motion without discussion. Any member of the board, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent agenda be removed and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent agenda, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single board action adopting the consent calendar. This evening, you have minutes from November 14th, 2022 regular meeting. Recommend approval. Check numbers 17508 through 17574 from the general fund were paid in the amount of $89,895.32. The emergency fund, check numbers 5164 through 5181 were paid in the amount of $45,638.48. Receiving fund, check numbers 2883 through 2887, paid in the amount of $140,847.79. The escrow fund, check numbers 1887 through 1897, paid in the amount of $43,291.48. There were no checks drawn on the roads SAD fund. There were 3 payrolls. There was one payroll dated November 17th, 2022. It was an election payroll. Check number 7443 through 7480 totaled $19,262.91. Payroll dated November 6th through November 19th, check number 7481 through 7482 totaled $49,039.76. And the payroll dated November 20th through December 3rd, check number 7483 through 7486 totaled $56,356.92. Total payroll was $124,659.59, and total amount paid $444,332.66. Proposed budget adjustments, BA 20223 through BA 2022-7, and other items, Board of Review appointments, EMS Flex Program supplemental funding, resolution of 2023 Township Board meeting dates, the summer tax agreement with Northwest Education Services, Traverse Transportation Coordinating Initiative Board representation, liquor license modification from Class C to a Class B license, and the MDNR Spark Grant application resolution.
Okay, and with that, was there any items that anyone from the board would want removed from the consent agenda? Yes.
Number 2 and number 7.
Sure. And that is the East Bay Ambulance grant application and the DNR Spark Grant resolution. Any other items? Okay, seeing none, is there any member of the public that would like anything removed from the consent agenda? And I think that we will put that EMS application. Warren, if you're okay with it, we're just going to pop that in right before you, as our staff is here for that, okay? So we'll put that first. And then we'll put the Spark grant application last after the CIP plan, okay? Okay, with those 2 changes, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as amended?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Support.
Okay, motion by Walters, support by Cook. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Ann?
Walters.
Yes.
Cook.
Yes.
S. Cortade.
Yes.
Bartlett.
Yes.
M. Cortade.
Yes.
Lyle. Friend.
Yes. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the business before the Township Board. Nick, if you'll just pop up here, and we'll go on to the EMS Flex Program supplemental funding. So this is a grant award that was bestowed upon the township, and there are some requirements with that. So as you know, we will either usually have the board approve a grant application or the award. Sometimes we don't get a chance to get the application before the board. So this is part of the award. And I think that I'll let you finish with how many communities and what the requirements are.
Yeah, there's 16 other agencies that are participating in it. And basically what it is it's from Michigan Center for Rural Health. Obviously, we're a rural community and we do rural EMS. What they're trying to do is make sure they're getting better data on the state side of stuff for quality assurance, type of calls, number of incidents, things like that. So with that, we're trying to align our EPCR, our electronic patient record, with the state's better, because we have data points that don't quite all meet up. And part of that is to do that. And then a lot of this other is basically EMS leadership and EMS quality assurance training to make sure that we're hitting all our metrics that we need to and that we're aligning with the state's requests and requirements.
Okay, so with that, Mindy, did you have a specific question?
I want to say congratulations, A, and B, I was curious how many people are actually going to get trained?
So with the quality assurance stuff, it'll be kind of a one-on-one, and then it'll be fed down through the crews. So we'll learn the quality metrics of pediatric seizures and things like that. And then that'll work within our quality assurance program that we do for reports to make sure all of the correct interventions are being done, and that's all being tracked correctly. So it'll feed down through everybody, but when it comes to the EMS leadership, it'll probably be me and another person, and then in classes that I've already taken, it'll probably be somebody else that fills in with that. All of the lodging and travel is covered. The only thing we'll be covering for that is hourly wages.
Did you say some of it too is virtual?
Yeah, the quality assurance stuff is all Zoom-based, so it's all,
So is it Zoom-based live, or is it something that if somebody gets a call, they can leave and come back?
it's Zoom-based live.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a struggle.
So I had two thoughts with that. A is, I know we're down a paramedic, or we're not down because we hired one, but come January, we're going to be down a paramedic, and I just wanted to find out the status of that. Are we still looking? Are we still,
Still actively looking.
okay, do we have an ad anywhere in particular that,
We did post it once, and then I will be, after the first year, posting it again.
Okay.
With a little more heavy recruiting.
because I'm concerned that it does say in there that some of the classes are away, and I'm just concerned that we're not going to have enough people to backfill, so that was just my thought. I didn't have any specific questions, but I did want to,
My hope is by the time, because these won't be till April.
Okay.
And throughout the rest of '23 and into '24, my hope is that we're full staff.
well, by then, okay, perfect.
And we were just talking about this, we've had really good recent part-time of pulling of shifts, which has helped tremendously. Yeah.
It's winter time, so they're coming out of the woodwork again.
Okay, well, I appreciate that information.
With that, is there a motion, and I'm just looking for the one that is in
Well, I have one more
the packet?
question, if you
Sure.
don't mind. It states that there are 2 laptops or tablets. Is that enough? Do we need to look at an additional one, especially since you're adding other staff to the equation on the classes you've already taken? That way, we're not trying to shuffle the laptops
Yeah,
among
so
others?
basically the laptops are for patient care reporting. So the big thing is bedside patient care reporting, so that as we're working on a patient or transporting a patient, we can do most of our recording in the back of the truck. So that'll be plenty for what we need.
Okay.
Okay, the motion is to approve East Bay Ambulance participation in the MCRH grant and complete the laptop tablet agreement. Is there support?
Second.
Motion by Lyle, support by M. Cortain. Any further discussion? All in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by no? Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. And thank you, Warren, for letting us slide Nick in there. Okay, we'll go on to the next item, which is Traverse Connect. Warren Call, who is the director of Traverse Connect. If you'll just come up, and you can either stand at the podium or take a seat, whichever is most comfortable for you. Yeah, and in the packet, I did talk about how you had reached out, and we had some discussions on economic development and the agreement, the draft agreement that you supplied, and so if you want to take it from there.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you today this draft agreement that's before you. I'm joined today by my colleague Brenda McClellan here, who's with me from our team. What you have here is the draft of a proposed agreement that is much in line with several other agreements that we've recently concluded with other local municipalities. Before getting into the details, I thought what would be the most helpful would be to provide a little bit of background about kind of how we got to this point. So please stop me anytime if you have any questions, but I thought a little bit of background would probably be helpful. Back in 2017 at the County Economic Development Corporation, there was an initiative that came forward that identified that there was not countywide collaboration on economic development policy. There was some staff at that point in the county that were trying to restart that, but that eventually fell by the wayside as well. And so several people that were then on the County Economic Development Corporation put forward the idea of formulating a new strategic plan for our region and our county's economic development. From that plan came the initiation of the Economic Development Organization concept, which basically an Economic Development Organization, EDO for short, is the quarterback that works with all entities within the territory, within the county, be they municipalities, private businesses, nonprofits, et cetera, basically to support all of those entities in helping to further economic development goals. The conclusion from that process, which included township officials, it included county officials, it included for-profit and nonprofit involvement, was that the formerly Traverse Area Chamber of Commerce, as well as Traverse Connect, which was an affiliate of the Chamber of Commerce, would be repurposed. And repurposed with a new mission and a new vision involved to drive forward this idea of countywide collaborative economic development services that would support all entities, all municipalities, and all private sector individuals and companies. So that was the kind of the punchline at the end of that planning process. What happened from that process is we, starting in 2019, we merged the former Traverse Area Chamber of Commerce with Traverse Connect. We spun off a couple of other organizations to provide this new entity with a really clear focus. And it was repurposed with new staff, a new funding model, and new mission. That mission is to further the creation of family-sustaining careers in the county. So the idea being to promote those jobs that allow people to live here year-round, afford a house, afford a family, et cetera. So that's what we've been working on, starting in we started in mid-2019. That plan was approved at the very end of 2019, so 2020 was the first year of full operation. That started out with almost entirely private sector funding, and that was by design. The idea was to eventually get public sector investment, but initially we knew we had to prove the concept by getting private sector investment at the beginning. So for 2020, that was almost entirely private sector led. But since that time, we have been working to prove that concept and to implement the business model with our public sector partners, including now the city, the Traverse City DDA, the county, the airport, Garfield Township, and the Economic Development Corporation of the county as a separate entity from the county. So all of those organizations are now directly invested in our work. And I think it's important to point out all of those entities, we are working with them and we're providing a combination of two things. One is the broad economic development to support the entire region. And that's predicated on kind of a three-pillar approach, all right? The first of those pillars is regional cooperation and collaboration. So how can we work together, again, countywide, to make sure that we are, an attractive place to grow business, an attractive place to get a job, raise a family, et cetera. So that's regional collaboration and cooperation. The second pillar is direct support for businesses that are here and to attract more businesses that may want to relocate to this area or start in this area. And then the third pillar is workforce and talent development, whether that's attracting new people to the area who already have the skills that we need, or working with Kingsley Schools on a shop club program. So it kind of spans kind of the entire age gamut. So those are the three broad pillars that we work under. But an important, in all these agreements that we've developed with our public sector partners, there's the the more general things that I just went over, which are kind of economic strategy. There's also tailored programs that hopefully are, and services for each municipality's specific needs. So what you have before you is an agreement that combines those two things. And so I'll reference some page numbers here, but the agreement starts on page 31 of your packet, and this is page 1 of the agreement. And I'll go through the scope of services, specifically the first three sections. The subsequent sections are largely legal boilerplate that I think has already been vetted and is pretty standard. But I'll spend some time here, and again, please stop me if there's any questions, or I can take questions at the end. So on page 31 of the packet, the first section is the scope of services. So the first of these, A, B, and C, are the more general things that I referenced. So the development of economic strategy specifically for the township, which corresponds and fits in with the county and the regional strategy that we're working under with our other partners. Incorporating your feedback and the feedback from businesses and individuals and nonprofits and other organizations within the township to make sure that it's appropriate and relevant for your needs. The second item there, B, to publish data and statistics that are relevant to the work that we're doing, to make sure that there's a central point of contact for all the communication related to the work that's being done, and that to make sure that that information is both housed in an area that can be referenced and then shared with both the township and other relevant parties that may need it. And then C is to conduct annual site visits to targeted employers within the township. So your important employers, and not just from a size standpoint, but also from an industry standpoint, companies that may have the best potential to grow, or companies that have the best potential to grow the jobs that provide a living wage. So we can be specific and targeted. We do work directly with the County Economic Development Corporation and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation on those meetings to make sure that they're, MEDC has priority companies, we have priority companies, we incorporate all of them and work together. So a given, meeting with a company would include our team, the MEDC, oftentimes the Michigan Works, as well as potentially other organizations as appropriate, Michigan Department of Agriculture if it's a farming related, et cetera. So we work together on that. And the idea is to make sure that we're addressing the needs of those companies. So those are the more broad-based items that are detailed here. I do want to highlight item D because it is more specific to the goals and objectives of East Bay Township. So this is specifically to conduct a corridor improvement feasibility study and development plan for the township, including the inventorying of both existing commercial sites within those corridors that you have focused on, as well as determining the demand and possible location for additional development corridors or development parcels within the corridors that you've indicated. The idea would be to hopefully fill in those corridors in accordance with your master plan that you've just updated, as well as the zoning ordinance that you're, I believe, working on right now. So the idea would be to help infill and build the corridors and the businesses that you want to see there, is the basic concept. And then the last two items are accountability issues. So E, providing you with quarterly written reports so that you're well aware of what we're working on your behalf, and all the other pertinent economic development initiatives that we have with other entities and organizations across the county and across the region. And then, of course, to provide in-person updates at your meetings as appropriate and as requested by the board. So those are the scope of services. I'll pause there really briefly to see if there's any specific questions before I move on to any other items. Yes?
You say a data dashboard. My questions are, what will be included? How will that information be derived? And does the township need hours to help you do this?
The township does not need hours to help us do that. We intend to collect that information and do it without requiring additional time. Most of the data sources are available publicly, so we're collecting information and then publishing a dashboard from available sources. That's kind of in the broad sense, but also we look for targeted information. So we may survey, for example, township businesses specifically to be able to report on and provide you all with information on a specific data set. So I'll reference the broad ones and then maybe a specific one. On a broad sense, we look specifically at the GDP per employee. That's a really good measure of, and it's changed over time. So are we growing businesses and growing jobs that provide high value? So that's an example of a more broad metric. We also track educational attainment. When I say educational attainment, it's a bachelor's degree, an associate's degree, or a certificate of value. So it could be a training program or a certificate program, such as NMC's new construction trades program, to make sure that we're growing educational attainment, but it's not just bachelor's degrees, it's other appropriate degrees. So those are some broad measures. A more specific measure, an example of that would be in our work with the DDA, for example, we were able to go back, survey DDA companies within the DDA district, and go back and tell the DDA exactly the changes in services and scope that those companies wanted to see from the DDA and from the city. So that's an example of a more specific item.
So do you look at housing with this as well?
Yes. Housing is a big focus. So right now, we're working with Garfield Township. They have a couple of things. Their big issue that we're working on that's very specific to their needs is the development of several parcels that they've already outlined. So with some of those parcels, it's commercial and industrial, but several of the parcels they've outlined or identified are specifically for high-density housing. So how can we both make sure that the housing that they're going to develop is addressing the need that's out there, but also how can we help them, access funds and, ARPA dollars and other things to make those developments a reality.
There are other questions at this point? Okay. Go ahead, Glenn.
You say that the county is part of this, right? They bought into it.
They have, yes.
Okay. I guess what about the townships that have not bought in? How do you deal with when you find something that they could use? We just kind of go over and help them out? Is that what we do?
Yeah, good question. So from a standpoint of the process that we're working through, city, county were first. Garfield Township, East Bay is the second township that we're presenting this to and hope to have an agreement with. But we are talking with those other townships about their needs and when it's appropriate to initiate that formal agreement with them. So those discussions are underway. But importantly, we don't ever want to be in a position of holding back a good project or a good development activity because we don't have a formal agreement in place, right? So if for example, we didn't have this agreement in place and there was a business that wanted to move here, that it made sense to locate in East Bay Township, well, we're still going to work with that business. And in fact, we've put businesses in touch with commercial realtors and others in that example who may, I can't point to something specific, but we certainly haven't eliminated East Bay Township from the list just because we didn't have a formal agreement. I think what's different here is with a formal agreement, number one, you are supporting the broad concepts that I've outlined, the regional competitiveness, business support, and talent and workforce issues. But also, it's the specific, deliverables in this. So, for example, the corridor plan is specific to, your needs.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mindy.
This one's for Claire. Does this in any way contradict our grant application?
Actually, I can help you with that one. It actually feeds right into it.
Okay.
Because our match on that grant application, part of it can be considered this contract. So we can, the $15,000 that's enumerated in this contract can be used towards our match in that, and it will actually support what we're doing in that grant application and aid that.
Okay.
Sorry, Claire, do you have anything else to add? Okay, okay. Other questions?
I had one. You had talked about employers, target employers. You work with private entities in the county and townships in the city. I know you'd mentioned Kingsley from a workforce development standpoint, but where, from an employer standpoint, where does the local school systems fall? I guess, is there any plan to work with TCAPS and some of the other school systems to recruit teachers and, like, more importantly, early child care centers to the area?
Yeah, excellent question, and currently, obviously, a huge need. So a couple things. One, we already actually have long-standing agreements with the school systems. So they are invested in what we're doing. So we already have partnerships with them that are ongoing and have been in place for years, and we do work specifically with them on a number of issues. Under that first pillar that I mentioned, that's regional competitiveness, a big part of our work there is being an advocate for public policy that's beneficial to our region. So a couple of examples, because, for example, the CFO of TCAPS is on our Government Relations Committee.
Okay.
They've come to us with several issues where they need help. Sometimes it's, a Headley rollback issue. Sometimes it is teacher housing and how to address that issue. So they come to us, and then we work with them as an advocate, either with the local municipality to help them, or oftentimes at the state level to address a need. We're currently working with them on a state level request that would provide funding specifically for it's not just teacher housing, but school employee housing. And I think it's important to mention that that's not just with TCAPS. That's a joint collaboration with Northwest Ed, TCAPS, the Catholic school system, and Interlochen. So we're working together because they all have the same issue.
Right. Okay.
The other thing I would mention about childcare and advocacy, we helped to spearhead with our partners at the Great Start Collaborative and United Way the package of bills that passed Lansing last year with bipartisan support, which I think is important. They were sponsored by our local representative, Jack O'Malley. They were signed by the governor, and they specifically were geared toward improving childcare availability in this area. We hope that tomorrow, actually, something similar will happen with a package of bills related to housing. Wayne Schmidt, locally here, was one of the sponsors of that package of bills. We helped to develop the package. We hope, I think, 1 o'clock tomorrow, our Director of Government Relations will be down with the governor on the bill signing for that. So when we talk about regional competitiveness, it involves public policy advocacy and also, going to bat to get federal money and state money for specific projects in this region.
Okay. Thank
I
you.
think the chamber, too, has picked up the mantle quite a long time ago with respect to early childhood education, too, and the advocacy on a state level. They've been long involved with that, even with your predecessor, so.
Yeah.
I think we could go ahead if we want to
Yeah, the other items I just wanted to cover were, the item number 2, the payment is $15,000 for 1 year. That is to Mr. Lyle's earlier comment, that's in line with, for example, Garfield Township. So we've, the county, city, DDA, larger entities, those contracts are for larger dollar amounts. This is inappropriate, in equal level with other townships. Then number 3, the term of the agreement is for 1 year. And obviously, throughout that year, coming back with those quarterly reports that I mentioned and any in-person presentations you'd like. And then we always produce an annual report as well that summarizes a number of things. So the idea here is that executing on this, as we have with other municipalities, we have broad economic development programs that support hopefully your goals and your goals as they relate to other municipalities in the region. Plus the specific and tailored services focused on your priorities, such as the corridor plan. And then ultimately for everyone to improve outcomes. Outcomes for business development and specifically employment. And employment that provides for, the kind of jobs that you can live here and raise a family. So that's the details I wanted to highlight. The rest of the contract is, again, like I said, pursuant to other kind of boilerplate legal documentation, obviously for council's review, but happy to take any questions on that as well.
So just one or two items I wanted to mention is the $15,000 that's mentioned in the compensation clause was put into our 2023 budget in preparation for this so that we did have the funds should the board choose to enact on this contract. So that would be available for use. And then I think from a planning and zoning's perspective, I think we're looking forward to having the ability to, have the resources of Traverse Connect in this scope of services. And also, as we move forward on different initiatives that are really symbiotic with what they're doing, that'll be very helpful. So,
Do we think that 1 year is enough for the Bayshore study?
well, I think with these agreements, they're typically on an annual basis with municipalities, and we wouldn't typically see like a lease that we would have that would continue. We would, I would encourage the board, if we choose to engage in this, that, we mentally prepare to be involved with it for a good amount of time, like 2 years or even 3, to see the results of those processes, because a year is a very short period of time. But obviously, the contract is for a year.
I know that we've been trying to work towards that Bayshore corridor, and that, I think, would help the planning department to move forward,
Yeah.
as well as give Traverse Connect a good idea of who we're looking for to put down there,
Yeah.
to attract down there.
Yeah.
And so having it sooner than later, say 3 years down the line, would be more helpful.
Yeah.
So,
The, just recently, we were contacted from a developer who is under contract with a couple parcels together in that area. And they are looking at, what they want to do with that property, whether it's a hotel, which we told them there's already like 5 going in there. But, all of those hotels that are going in now were built and done on market research that's probably 3 or 4 years old by now. So there were some other things that we encouraged them to take a look at too, because
we could use some good restaurants for those hotel stayers.
actually, we did mention that. But anyway, But that's a really good example where I think Traverse Connect will be helpful as well. And, let's just say that parcel that's been longstanding wasn't under contract. That could also be helpful in, identifying potential businesses that could come and locate there. So we have had a lot of infill in there, but there are still some parcels that, and parcels going up for sale too. There's older facilities along that line too. So we'll see those come up on the market as well, and that'll be helpful. Yes?
Has this been run past the attorney?
No, I have not taken this through the attorney. So what I'd like to do tonight is get a feeling from the board if they would like to engage in something like this. And if that's the case, then we'll just run it through our legal counsel. I don't see any issues with it and don't expect for the attorney to find any. But I would still like to do that, and then we could bring it back for a formal approval at a subsequent meeting, which would be January if the board knew what decision they wanted to make. Mindy?
So we're talking about the corridor improvement facility, but we also need to talk about our capital improvement plan. And so can we add to this later, or should we wait until we've figured that out before we engage?
Well, no, I think the capital improvement plan is a separate and distinct issue from this. I think this will more likely be, really targeted to the economic development and, or is targeted to the economic development, and specifically with that corridor, and then maybe even some parcels along Hammond as well, and the industrial areas too. So that engagement with the businesses. The capital improvement plan will be a bit different, and that will be.
I think there's some overlap, though.
But it'll really be the resources that the township needs in some of the water and sewer, township facilities, that sort of thing. And that will go through the planning commission and have that impact through that. But I think that this is a little bit different.
One other question comes to mind. We created a Renaissance zone back 14, 15. Is that still standing, or how does that interfere or connect with this?
Yeah, I believe that's referencing the Northern Nexus entity, yeah. So that's one of the things that has come up at the Economic Development Corporation with the county. Not that they're the same thing, but because there's multiple townships invested in that Northern Nexus initiative. And it's largely been, there's not been a lot of activity in the Northern Nexus entity. That is something that we could and we have had discussions about supporting and perhaps even taking over at some point, but we haven't gotten to that point yet.
And actually, Chris Forsythe has brought that up recently too, about, kind of re-engaging that and seeing how that fits within what's being done with economic development in the Grand Traverse region.
Yeah, I don't remember how many townships. I know it's Garfield, East Bay, and I want to
Blair.
say Blair.
Blair was in it.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Yeah. And that was agreement-based, not a financial obligation
I
to.
kinda like that myself.
I can appreciate that. I'm sure Warren can appreciate that too, but I know that their organization has bills just like we do. Is there consensus or support for, entering into this type of agreement for the next year? That is definitely what the recommendation would be from me, with meeting with Warren and also speaking with others that he's been involved with contractually that he mentioned through the county and Garfield Township and so forth.
I would be in support of it. I think it's something we need and a long time coming. We've tried it in other avenues and haven't gotten anywhere, haven't gotten any traction, so.
All the way back into 2011, is that when that corridor improvement private entity tried to grow and it kind of fell flat?
Mm-hmm.
No, and I'm looking forward to it kind of coming back up to the surface. So I'm glad that this can be used in kind to help with that.
Economic development's important, very important, and we need some dedicated resources to it. And as you guys know, especially you two who work in the office here, we have a pretty skeleton crew that has their plates full. We don't mind that, but economic development isn't something that, we have the ability to really, and there is a regional scope to it as well, too. So there's just so much more benefit when it's done like that as well. So, yeah, if there's no objections, then I'll take this through legal counsel and bring it back in January for formal approval and enact it. Okay, Warren?
Thank you all for your time.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will move on to the US 31 Coastal Management Grant Application. Claire, if you would like to come up and talk about this grant opportunity that you and Carl Ferguson have been working on.
Sure. So, good evening. You'll see probably the overview is familiar because this is a very similar grant application that we went to, that we pursued for USDA for funding for MDARD. So we are, continuing to pursue this. It would really be kind of building on the master plan and would be more of a targeted, focused sub-area plan. And I think the master plan effort that we went through with the public visioning really set us up for this sub-area plan because we've got some, specific language about the vision and placemaking amenities and kind of what we want for this corridor. It's also building on efforts by the county and by previous planners. So this is kind of, as you know, a long time in coming. This coastal zone management program, the grant funding would actually begin, it would be fiscal year '24. So it's kind of a long lag time, but we submitted for ARPA as well. So we're just pursuing as many different avenues as possible. This specific funding is focused on resiliency. And so I think it would be a really nice fit for this corridor just because we're right next to East Bay. And so it's it would be planning and economic development and looking at redevelopment ready areas through the lens of resiliency. So considering changing water levels and more, intense precipitation events and kind of some of the natural implications of having a business district right next to East Bay. So I think it's a really good fit, and just reading the grant application and some of the materials, we've talked to LIAA, and they've done a lot of the mapping that Coastal Zone Management Program likes to see, and they've worked pretty extensively with Coastal Zone Management Program. So we've written them into our scope of services, and we would have them provide some technical expertise on some of the mapping. And as Beth mentioned, it requires a 50% match, but we can have in-kind. And so that example of the services that Traverse Connect would be providing can go towards that, approximately $75,000 that we'd be looking for. Beta is also, they're contributing $4,000 dollars, but then also they're making some, taking a look at their scope over the next few years, and so they're probably going to have some in-kind match as well. They're taking a look at the Bay Line and doing some outreach and around their future bus stops and mobility plan and stuff, so.
We thought we could potentially get this shaved a little closer to 50,000 by the time we included our staff's in kind, Beta's in kind, and then the use of the Traverse Connect contract with it.
Yeah, so we're excited about it. It's kind of after we finish the master plan and the zoning ordinance, this is like the next big project that we want to undertake, and so I think it's great to set us up so that we've got the funding source for it.
So the motion in front of you is to approve the resolution approving the submission of the grant application to Eagle, and that resolution goes forward with the application, correct? Okay.
What would the resolution number be?
It's a good question.
Two sides.
So we need to keep a resolution number for number 3 under the consent agenda. And
It appears as though, I'm
Num-
looking at the minutes.
is number 4 a resolution, no, that's just an agreement, okay.
So the last resolution that we moved was 2022-29. That was approving the updated fiscal year 23 cost of permits, applications, fees, licenses. I don't see one after that in the minutes. So it would be 2022-30
Would be number 3 on the
would be under
consent
consent.
calendar.
And then
Sue, with the
30
liquor license, we always use their,
We use theirs.
Do we
because it's a
number
state
it?
Resolution, we do not number
Okay.
it.
okay. So we would be at 31.
Correct.
I'll make a motion to approve 2022-31 resolution approving submission of the grant application to Eagle, the coastal management program.
Support.
Okay, motion is made by Walter, support by Cortate. Is there any other questions or discussion? Sure, Glenn.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions.
Sure.
Number one, you got hotel motel groups down there, you got restaurant groups. This is gonna benefit them. How much are they, gonna contribute toward that's gonna be my first question. And
Yeah,
then-
we don't have anything secured yet. I think the first time that we applied for a grant, we did approach some of those individual business owners and, Traverse City Tourism, kind of on behalf of the hotels, has done pretty significant in-kind, just with the development of the logo and some of the services they provide, but, yeah, no financial contribution at this time.
That's what I was afraid you were gonna say. The other thing is, you're talking about putting flags or whatever, banners up. Who's gonna be, is East Bay Township gonna be responsible for buying the banners and paying to have them put up?
That's the way that we priced it out.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, we're gonna have to come back to the board even if you get the grant, correct? Well, I'll support the grant, but I got some real tough questions on it because
Yeah.
we're putting $75,000 into a project that benefits the basic group down there. And I guess I got a problem with it, but
Yeah. So
let's see if we get the grant
Okay.
first. Then we can,
So one thing I do want to point out, maybe Claire could speak some more to this, but the grant is geared toward, as well, benefiting the public. So kind of the plan for that area, you want to speak to some of the ways in which there's some community benefit?
Yeah, I would say there's the component that's the banners, and we, have pretty detailed information about, pricing out the banners and the installation, and have gotten in touch with the utility companies, so we have pretty good idea of what that will look like, but the majority of the grant would be going towards engaging, residents, property owners, the general public about kind of placemaking amenities as well as public infrastructure investments that would make it more of a place, more of a destination, kind of vision for priority redevelopment sites along the corridor, how to improve access to the water, whether it's, people coming from land to water, water to land, just kind of taking a look at that whole region, and with a focus on public infrastructure and public amenities.
So really, the Traverse Connect stuff will really dovetail to this.
I think it will feed, I think we need a feasibility study, and we need to take a look at the Corridor Improvement Authority model, but we really want to make sure we have a vision for, because if we don't want to enact a Corridor Improvement Authority and say, oh, we're going to, be bringing in this funding, but what are we what are we paying
What are we
for?
doing?
So
Yeah.
we really want a vision that's supported by the community, supported by the business owners, property owners, that would that we'd be able to implement if the Corridor Improvement Authority was to
Well,
move
and
forward.
hopefully through that process that Traverse Connect is talking about, you'll get some cohesiveness with those businesses down there that will get them ready for this.
Yeah, and I think the projects play on each other nicely because there's also, we're going through the redevelopment ready communities certification process, and so a lot of what we're required to do, an economic development plan, a corridor plan, inventory of redevelopment sites, vision of those sites, that both of these
This all
projects
feeds
will
in.
kind of feed into that and help us with the certification that will set us up for funding opportunities, so.
Okay, there was a motion by Walters and support by Cortade, correct? Okay. Any further discussion?
Just kind of one final comment. I know the 31 corridor, the beach district, has been kind of an idea, a vision, sounds like, for a while. There's been some effort put forth. I know you've kind of taken it on to kind of see this project through, and it seems like it's a long-term play. There's a lot of planning that's got to go in. There's a lot of stakeholders. The state, obviously, with 31 being under their control, probably has a lot of say in what goes on. Just kind of curious, is there a rough timeline on when the end goal here is? Like when, and I know there's a lot of effort, there's a lot of people's time, there's money going into this from all different angles, but what would be what's the vision of the end goal here when something's like, when the corridor is established, all the placemaking done, it's there? I mean, is this a 5-year deal or a 10-year deal?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think that this project would be funding kind of very focused planning effort that would be, approximately 12 months of kind of the intensive, development of the vision and kind of the renderings. But in terms of the actual implementation, 5, 10, 15, 20
Okay.
years into the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, probably an ongoing phasing.
Yeah,
It just
and I mean,
depends on
yeah,
what
the Corridor
funding
Improvement
you get.
Authority could be, a 35-year, whatever that tax increment financing.
But it does take on different components, and different stakeholders have then different levels of involvement and responsibility. So corridor improvement is a completely different thing with with the management of it and decision-making for it.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, this is a resolution, so we'll do a roll call vote, Ann?
Walters.
Yes.
S. Cortade.
Yes.
M. Cortade.
Yes.
Lyle.
Yes.
Cook.
Yes.
Bartlett.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. With that, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the zoning administrator classification. I meant to bring this to you in November. You can stay there for a second if you like, since he works for you. But I meant to bring this to you in November when we were doing the wage resolution, and it was my oversight that I did not. So what Claire and I have talked about is moving this ZA position from compensated on an hourly basis to compensated on a salaried basis. And it gives you an example in here and rationale why. And then just some information for you as far as what we looked at in doing that. Looked at kind of a couple-step process that was recommended in transitioning from a classification of hourly to salary, which was one, first and foremost, to examine the job duties for exempt versus non-exempt with the Fair Labor Standards Act. And because if you have a salaried employee that really fits non-exempt, they still qualify for overtime. However, if we have a salaried employee that is exempt, then that is not overtime. So just want to make sure that have our eyes open with that. And with respect to the standards from the Department of Labor, this position would qualify for exempt. And so that would be a salaried exempt position, which would not qualify for overtime. The second step is to determine the salary, because under the Fair Labor Standard Act, you have to have for salaried exempt and for salaried non-exempt, they have to reach certain income thresholds. And we do exceed those, so there's not an issue with that. And what we're proposing is the salary would just literally be the current hourly rate times that 40 hours per week. So we're not suggesting any adjustment in salary. The third step is making sure the employee knows and agrees. And actually, we have talked with the employee regarding this, and that is something that he's in favor with, that we think that benefits the employee and benefits the township. The other is how to handle the time and record keeping. Well, clearly, he's already record keeping right now with doing a timesheet. And however, we wouldn't do a timesheet just as Claire doesn't or other salaried employees don't, but we still would do a record keeping. And I've instructed Claire to keep it at 40 hours per week, you know, whether she works 42 or 43 one week and then 37 the next, or however that works. But I want to keep them in a consistent 40 hours a week because I don't want to burn anybody out. I want to keep their time and attention and employment for a long time. So I don't think the record keeping is an issue. And then the last step is just to make the necessary, you know, payroll adjustments if we choose to go down that route. So the example that I gave you is when we had the blight issue. Obviously, that was a very intensive 3 weeks. And typically, we don't have that. I understand that. But we do have times when we will have somebody call on a Friday, or when they notice something that's going on, say, for example, some zoning violation. And obviously, he's already worked 40 hours that week. And so if he were to go out on that call, then we're into overtime, and we haven't budgeted for that. So this would allow him to address those calls as the urgency is needed, if needed, on a Friday afternoon or something like that, or even on the weekend. Obviously, if it becomes a standard of every weekend or something like that, that's a different issue we would address. But this would allow him to tailor his hours for the ebb and flow of the workflow. Did you have anything to add to that, Claire?
No, that summarizes it well.
Okay. Did any board members have any question on this?
Going, I guess you said you've had a conversation with this individual. What, any feedback or?
Yeah, he would appreciate it because he feels a little bit like his hands are tied, especially if he were to get, Claire and PT do a really good job of monitoring their email and texts on the weekends. And so that's not to say they're at anybody's beck and call on a text or an email, but they do a pretty good job for emergent ones. And he feels like, you know, if he gets a call on something, he feels really limited in his capacity to deal with that if he has the time. So one example is, we don't get very many of these, but I think it was like a Thursday night, and we had a question on a short-term rental. And so we all happened to see it. I ended up going because I was coming back into town, and so I went past the house and did photo documentation of it. But had PT, you know, not already worked 40 hours that week, he probably would have gone out and done that, and maybe even been there a little bit sooner than I was there because I was coming in from out of town. But just those types of things. And I think that, and matter of fact, I know that the financial obligation of the township will remain the same. It'll just allow us to more easily adjust, like I said, to that workflow.
And just on the, it's sort of kind of a side topic, but you were mentioning that y'all obviously do record keeping, timekeeping now for him. Are those hours that he tracks documented to be tied to specific issues or projects now?
Yeah, no, we just really do just an overall time. Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, no question. I struggle with salaried employees. You know, when I was farming, I worked both. I worked hourly and I worked for a salary. And I never was taken advantage of, but it's a very difficult situation sometimes. On PT's part, you just mentioned that, what if, you know, so he has to stay a little later tonight, but then he's going to make that up later on. I know him, and he's going to be volunteering sometime. From that point of view, he's just that kind of guy. I mean, he's just going to get the job done, and it is what it is. So I struggle with the idea of changing it any. I mean, it's an hourly type position. It kind of fits, to me, more that way. And I also remember years ago, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but we had, everybody was on salary in this building, and certain people weren't showing up and whatever. I'm not truly in favor of going to a salary. It's not a bad thing, but I think there can be abuses both ways unintentionally. And I'm not in favor of it.
Sure. Other comments? A couple things I would just mention, and again, as I mentioned, I looked up the exemption status, and one of the specific things it talks about an employee's primary duty includes the exercise of discretion and independent judgment with respect to matters of significance. And that perfectly encapsulates exactly what Preston does on a daily basis. So I do feel like it definitely concurs with what a salary would be, with what an exempt employee would be. I also feel like while I know Preston to be a very generous, kind person, you're exactly right, Matt, for sure. I also know that this township requires a lot, and we expect a lot out of our employees, and our residents do too. But we also become very wise on how to protect ourselves too. And I believe PT knows how to do that very well, as being an officer for a number of years, and the experience that he's gained in this ZA position as well, to make sure that, you know, that the township is served very well, but that he also is fair to himself as well. So, and I would never let that, I think, hopefully Claire and PT, while I won't ask them to express anything and put them on the spot, hopefully, I think that they would concur that I'm someone to work under who is very, very fair with their time, and with the level of expectation from them. And so I would never put them in that type of situation. I want these employees to be here for a long time. They're servicing the township well. And I wouldn't be bringing this to you if I thought it at all in any way, shape, or form did a disservice to Preston. And as a matter of fact, when I neglected to bring it to you in November, he was the one, I think, who reminded us staff-wise about inquiring about it. So I think it's definitely something he would prefer to see as well. So I think that there's a benefit both ways, which we can't always say that. But with that, I would move to approve the changes to the zoning administrator position to a salaried position as of January 1st, 2023, with the salary, 2023 salary of $63,211. And that number in the motion is exactly what he is hourly at 40 hours per week.
Support.
Okay. Motion made by Friend, supported by Walters. Further discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed by no.
No.
Okay, show that M. Tate dissents, and the motion passes. Thank you very much, Claire, for being here tonight. Appreciate that. We'll move on to the CIP plan. So this wasn't anything hugely significant, but I did want to get the board's feedback on this. We've talked about mention to the board and didn't hear any dissension, but putting in place the capital improvement plan in the beginning of 2023, in line with our RRC certification, and also as well, that will tie really nicely into our fund balance adjustment and our ARPA funding, all of those things combined. I would like to have somebody facilitate those discussions, because I think that would be a good thing. And again, the CIP ends up going through to the Planning Commission as well. So we can definitely, one of our options available to us is to put out a request for qualifications, and we can certainly do that. Also, one is because it's very limited in scope, and I think that we have a lot of the advance work done. So, for example, on those capital improvement projects, we have all of the ARPA projects already that we've outlined pretty extensively that went to the county. So we have that done. We have been looking at the fund balances, so we know what's required by statute or by funding source. We also know what our ARPA funding is. And so with that, I think it would not be a huge commitment. But I talked with Claire, asked her if she knew from her previous experience how she felt about, or she said that John Michelangelo, who has done a ZBA training for us and Planning Commission training for us, takes specific interest and does a really nice job with capital improvement plans. And so we do use Beckett and Rader. They staff our Parks Commission, and they help us with any overflow of work that we have with the Planning Commission. You'll remember that they helped when Claire was on maternity leave. And so one option we have available to us is just for me to contract with Beckett and Rader and have John Michelangelo do that. They would just charge an hourly rate for what they're doing. And I think that would be a decent way to go. I think, Claire, did you mention to me you typically think you see CIP plans $10,000 to $15,000 range? And I'm wondering if it would even be that much, because we have so much of that upfront work done to give to him, that I think really it would be meeting facilitation and then the documents between that. So I just wanted to see if the board wanted me to go out for an RFQ, which is specific, time intensive and so forth, or if we could just move forward and hire that consultant, and see if you had a preference on that.
Personally, I'd just soon see you go out for an RFQ. And the biggest thing though, DPW handles water sewer, correct? So that isn't in there.
Well, it isn't part of it. Yes, it is. We'll be taking a look at some of that.
This CIP would be for 2024 and moving forward?
Usually a 5-year, rolling 5 years.
But the plan wouldn't be completed till what, mid-year next
Yeah.
year?
Yeah.
I'm inclined to agree with Glenn, and certainly encourage Beckett and Rader to apply. It's not that we wouldn't want them to do that for us, but I believe it's in our best interest to see what else is there, what other people might want to see, to offer for us. So I would say go out for the RFQ.
Yep. And that's fine. We can absolutely do that, Mindy.
I think it's going to come in closer to 5, so I think that the RFQ is going to be a lot of money, just in time and effort. But I don't know. I didn't talk to Bucket and Raider to see if that's, a current
Yeah.
inflation-based number either, right?
Yeah.
Are you looking for qualifications or actually getting a formal bid?
No, I would probably just look for qualifications and an hourly rate.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's how I would go with it, because I don't think, I don't know, Claire, do you have any input on that? I mean, I feel like we have got a lot of the upfront work done that would go into the decision. Wouldn't it make more sense to just have an hourly rate than a entire scope of services with a pre-canned amount to it?
Can you get both?
That's difficult for them to do. I mean, usually when you get both, what they'll give you is a price for the scope of services and then an hourly rate for anything that goes beyond that scope of services.
I've just got one.
Yeah,
So I facilitated some capital improvement programs in my capacity at Beck and Raider. I think they ranged from like $2,000 or maybe even less for the village of Ellsworth. So it might be worth a conversation just to kind of figure out what that scope would look like, because I guess I don't really know exactly what the process would look like, but it could be significantly less than 10 to 15,000.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Well, just so I get it clear in my mind, when you're talking capital improvement, first thing I think about water and sewer, but I'm trying to leave that out. You're talking the building, anything that has a life expectancy.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And those projects too, like all of the projects that we put in for the ARPA funding. So, the things that the Parks is looking at doing, those types of things as well.
Yeah, and I do think we've gone through a lot of the process with the master plan, with the parks plan that we have, with the ARPA, and so, yeah, it really is kind of department by department, the prioritization, figuring out where your funding sources are, what years you're looking to do that, and, yeah, it helps with budgeting and.
Well, that would be pretty cheap then, right?
The ambulance would be involved in that.
Yeah, yeah. And we have that pretty well outlined, so that helps.
Done a good job at
Yeah, that,
figuring it out.
that helps. Yeah, so, yeah, we can, go ahead, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of see it both ways, but I also don't want to see the township staff go through a lot of effort when there's a high likelihood that Beckett and Raider would more than likely win the RFQ anyways. I mean, it sounds like they have a pretty strong track record with the township, unless, there's not a track record there, and if the costs come in reasonable, then they would have a pretty good chance. But besides township staff, I mean, I hate to waste other firms' time to respond as well.
Yeah, and that was really the impetus of me bringing this to all of you, is that, number one, we really felt like we had so much of the work done in advance that it would be relatively limited, and that the process of going through that RFQ, while I understand and support the basis of it and the intent behind it, it is pretty intensive, staffing-wise. And so I felt like we could get at that a lot more efficiently, get to the project too, instead of delaying the project by another, couple months, and getting those responses back. But any thoughts, Matt or Tracy?
I'm in favor of the RFQ.
Yeah, I'm good either way.
Yeah.
It's another 2 or 3 months, so it'll be February, March before we start the process.
Yeah, yeah. Well, however you guys want to handle that. It sounds like we have does anybody want to make a motion, or?
Do you need a motion?
Well, I
I mean, I can make a motion that we go out for an RFQ for the capital improvement project.
Support.
Okay. Motion made to go for an RFQ for the capital improvement plan, support by Quartade. Any further discussion? All those in favor indicate by aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? Okay. So we'll bring that back to you when we get the results. We'll put that together and get that out. Okay, very good, thank you. The last thing that we have in front of you is the Spark Grant. And the Spark Grant is, the DNR has been, the ARPA funding from the feds through the state to the DNR is 65,000, or I'm sorry, is more than this, but 65 million is what they have to spend towards additional monies to go to jurisdictions. They have been pretty successful with their DNR trust fund grants, and so they've modeled something similar, but not exactly identical, and they're canning those as the Spark grants. There's three rounds with the Spark grant. It is 15 million for the first, then 25 million, and then another 25 million. And there are some differences between that and the DNR trust fund that are kind of particular. One is no matches required. So with the DNR trust fund, there is a match required, 25% match. And then, of course, you get more points with the 50. But with the Spark grant, there is no match required. It's also different levels of funding. So the projects are to be awards between $100,000 is the minimum project award, which is high, to, oh gosh, I can't remember, it's like a couple $1 million is the maximum. Maybe about 5 million, I can't recall exactly, but it's quite high. A couple other differences are with the Spark grant, they let the community determine what is considered recreation, which is interesting because then some things that might not be targeted or perfect matches for the DNR, Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund, might be good projects for the Spark grant. Another one is with the trust fund, they don't allow monies to go for planning. With the Spark grant, there's planning can be a portion of the funding. So the Parks Commission took a look at what they would like to do for Spark grants. They itemized two. One was Arbutus number 5, and the other was the warming hut at Grace McDonald. Well, as Sarah Capriva and I, and then Carl Ferguson spoke, and Carl's been writing a lot of our grants, and Sarah obviously staffs the Planning Commission, writes grants, many grants for other, Parks Commission, sorry, and writes grants for many other municipalities too. The Arbutus number 5 actually is not particularly a good grant application for the Spark grant. That project was awarded in 2020 as a $600,000 project. And we've yet to see, because it's going out for bid this winter, and we have yet to see what that will come in at. The Parks Commission was thinking it will come in higher, as we have across the board seen things come in pretty high. And so they thought maybe to put in for the Spark grant for that. That excess funding on an already approved grant is not going to fly with the Spark grant. So their other one was Grace McDonald Park. So that is, as you know, up for a DNR trust fund grant for this year. That will be decided Wednesday, which is after this meeting. So this is a little bit of in case, exactly. In case that application is not funded through the DNR trust fund, then we would take, and we have the Spark grant deadline is like next week. So it left little time, and actually, to be quite honest and fair, they left not much time from the time that they finalized a lot of the criteria for the Spark grant to when the first one was due, to have a really well fleshed out grant application. Well, this would allow us to turn around and put that warming hut in for the Spark grant if it's not awarded for the DNR trust fund. We already have a lot of detailed grant application material, so it's possible to get that together in that short time frame. If we were awarded, we would not put in for that Spark grant. We would let the first application roll, and then the Parks Commission would make an application in the second and third round. You're limited to 3 projects and 3 submissions, but you can make more than 1 submission in 1 round. So this is a little bit of insurance. Where our scoring ended up with that application, we are definitely in the lower side of that. There are just some points that this project's never going to get. It's not on the Iron Bell Trail. It's not a trail project. So there are things, we were able to bring up that scoring by as much as we could. Carl and I went through it in detail, got with the grant coordinator, supplied the necessary additional information, and got the points that were available to us, but it is still not a particularly highly scored project. And so that's why we're looking at some insurance and putting this in for the Spark grant to see where we can go with that. We also think too, with the Spark grant, because it allows you to define and looks at the impact of COVID, we think we can make a good case for the impact of recreation in the Grand Traverse area, as people all, when they couldn't travel, right, they traveled within the state and came up here. And so we had a lot of use of our facilities. The other thing that this warming hut does is it allows for the use of and encourages outdoor recreation, which we've found to be very important across all ages and abilities. So that warming hut frees up people getting outside, using and going as a companion to someone who is using the sledding hill. So we think that we can play that up. Some of the downsides of that Spark grant are they're using Alice funding, Alice income funding, which I've never used before on a grant. And we don't tend to fare super well with the income part of that. So there's definitely a lot of places where we'll lose out. Also, they'll be looking at the number of parks per capita. And obviously, what they're looking at for there is those very rural communities that might not have a park or might have one park, and looking at expanding there. Well, you know, and also inner city parks, right? So Grand Rapids and the interior, Detroit, you know, Ann Arbor, getting more green space down into the cities. However, you know, you just never know when you put in for a grant.
Don't ask, you don't find out.
Right. You know, we don't know how many of those super rural communities that don't have a grant will have the capacity to put in for those grants. So we don't know. So this is a shot at another potential funding source.
Well, one, I really appreciate all the work that you and others do to find places to apply for money, because I know that it's not easy, and it's always looking and always trying to put it together, and so I think, you know, I appreciate that, whether we are successful or not, but at least you're putting it out there and trying to find it, so I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We'd like to be always more successful than we are, but that's just kind of the nature of grants sometimes.
Is there a dollar amount that you're going after?
So this is the same amount. As you recall, it's quite high for what you'd consider a warming hut. But if you remember, this was one of the first projects we saw that really had the impact of COVID. And the kind of the basis behind it was the estimate came from the architect, who was just repeatedly bit by not having the bids high enough because they'd been hit by COVID. You see what I'm saying? And so they don't like to give you a proposal that is not going to be sufficient. And so it was quite high. Our engineer thought it was high. I thought it was high.
It was high.
we all thought it was high. We did reach out to some builders. We had one respond with a much lower price, probably about, oh gosh, without doing the math, maybe 2/3 the cost or so. And another, builder comment that they thought it could come in at a little bit less, but no specifics from that builder. And again, we were asking them for the generosity of their time. This was not a bid. This was, what could we build it for? And so we didn't push any further than that. So with this, I noticed in the resolution that Sarah did not, there is no match required for the Spark grant. And I noticed that Sarah didn't put in for that. And I do have a question to this board, one for the resolution of support, but then also, would we want to see a match on here? Because I'm assuming.
You get extra points for a match.
Yeah, exactly. You do with the DNR trust fund, and I've just looked on their site today on the Spark grant, and I didn't see that it was associated with points, but it said something to the effect of a match is not required, but I don't know if they used the word quite encouraged, but something like that. And so it made me think that there might be points attached to that. So maybe what I would like to see is two resolutions, maybe one that has just to do with the resolution of this, because that's what we'll forward with the Spark grant. And then a second one that says what we would be willing to match up to. And then what we'll do is we'll reach out to Sarah and Carl and our grant coordinator to see what our best strategic decision is on the match. So if this board were to say, okay, up to 25%, we would then put in for that 25% if we get points for it. Or if the board said up to 50%, that type of thing. If they said, well, you only get points up to 25%, then we would probably put in the 25%. What resolution number would we be on? Is it 32?
So then do you do two resolution numbers then?
No, I think we could just do the resolution, which is let me find the resolution in that packet, in that page.
On page, it's 13 and,
On the supplement.
Supplemental.
I would think you'd have to do two resolutions. One would be as showing, and then the other one would be if this board chose to move ahead with a percentage.
This is all they're requiring in the resolution. And so if we had to show proof of the grant, I would just show them a motion for that. But this is all that the resolution requires is the approval of the application.
You're not
You would just
asking
have
for two.
verbiage.
You're not asking.
No, I'm not asking for two. I would be, I'm sorry, what was that?
You would just put that in the application verbiage.
Yeah, we would just have some ability to, we'd have the resolution, which grants us the ability to ask up to the 472, which means a zero match. But then if we have a motion separate, then, if you guys said, hey, you could go up to the 50%, just like you did with the DNR trust fund, then we would make that strategic decision on where we would put that level based on consultation with the grant writers. And you could put it in for zero, too. And roll the dice.
Well, I'm going to say this again. You don't have a viable project at the price that's there, and since we haven't taken the time to actually come up with an actual project with a price to apply for, I don't see why we're wasting everybody else's time. It's throw it against the wall and see if it sticks theory, and I don't agree with it.
The thing is, you put in for 472,000, which I think is crazy.
Yeah.
But, let's say the bid comes in at, say, 250. That's all you're gonna get.
That's exactly right.
Well, I know, but they're not going to approve the grant just based on, well, it might come in less.
Well, they're just approving the amount for the project. we're not looking at an itemized list.
Yeah.
No,
Correct?
but they're not going to approve $500,000 for a warming hut that's a 18 by 20-something shed.
So actually,
That's on top of a hill. It just isn't going to happen.
that doesn't factor into their point-based system. And if you look at the amounts that are going in for the grant funding, the difference is very, very little compared to competitive projects.
Okay, the other question I would have is, because, you know, this is shot in the dark. If we get it, great. If we don't, if we go out for a second part that said we're gonna match, and you're talking 50%?
Yeah, that's what's in for the DNR trust fund.
You're talking, probably the cost of what it costs to build it. You're talking 200 and some $1,000. Do this in two different resolutions, correct? Because, I'm gonna tell you right up front, I wouldn't vote for the 50% match of a warming hut at that, when we're looking at 50% of $472,000. I mean, the price of lumber, just to give you an idea, maybe you guys know, it was like $40 a sheet for half-inch OSB, which you use on sidewalls and roofs. It's down to $14 a sheet. 2x4s are about a third of what they were. So prices are, when I seen this before, I thought, somebody made a big mistake, but anyhow, I just want to put it right up front. I'll vote for going after the grant, the full grant, but at 50% of it, I wouldn't vote for it.
That's fine. This, like I said, this resolution will show support for the grant application
Right.
for anywhere up to the full amount. So, and then not a resolution, a motion after saying the amount that we would consider going for a match we could do, and we can factor that in.
And if you get positive news from the DNR, the trust fund grant.
We won't
this
submit
goes
it
in
at
the
all.
garbage, right?
That's right. Yep. So this resolution was 32.
Move to adopt Resolution 2022-32, a resolution in support of the Spark Grant application for the warming hut at Grace McDonald Park.
Support.
Motion is made by Walters and supported by Bartlett. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Ann?
Walters.
Yes.
Bartlett.
Yes.
Escortade.
No.
Cook.
Yes.
Lyle.
Yes.
M. Cortade.
No.
Friend.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, very good, thank you. And then is there a motion for any availability of match? We'd probably be looking at anything, obviously over zero, but up to the 50% that's in with the DNR trust fund.
I'll make a motion to, how do we write this? To match up to 25% of the 472,000 estimated for the Grace McDonald Park warming hut.
Support.
Motion by Walters and support by Cook. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed by no?
No.
Okay, we'll show that Lyle, M. Cortade, and S. Cortade dissent. Motion passes. Okay. Thank you for your time and attention to those items. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we have dealt with everything that we moved off the consent calendar, as well as the added CIP plan, so that will come back to public comment as one of our last items on the agenda. Is there any public comment tonight? Okay, seeing none, then move to upcoming meeting dates. Question for you. With the short-term rentals, we could not get the Fahey Schwartz they were not able to make the actual meeting dates of December or January with either of the two council. They have some leave issues, paternity leave issues. So that's a good thing for them, but a difficult thing for us scheduling. Would the board like to just see that brought back in February, or a special meeting date before that time?
Put in a regular date for February.
Okay, all right, well, that sounds good. Our next meeting date is, I believe it's January 9th, is that right?
I don't know, it's on this paper somewhere in here.
We'll go with January 9th. If not, it'll be posted on the website, so. All right, if there's no objection, we stand adjourned. Everybody have a Merry Christmas. It's hard to believe,
You
it's
too.
really hard to believe it's that
I see the K
time.
truck at your place, so I'll know.
It was at her place.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta show you that picture.